I thought the worst day of my life was the day I left home for a job overseas, missing my daughter's first piano recital. I was wrong. The worst day came 15 years later, when an email from her landed in my inbox at 3:07 a.m. The subject line was short. The body was shorter. Don't come to my graduation. I don't want to pretend. I stared at those words until the sun came up, replaying every missed birthday, every unanswered call, every time I told myself I'd make it up to her next time. But there was no next time. I had been erased from the most important day of her life, and maybe forever. What she didn't know was that I had been trying for years to make it right. Letters returned unopened, gifts left on her doorstep and never touched, invitations declined with a cold, "I'm busy." I thought I understood her pain. I didn't. The truth was far darker, and I would only uncover it because of what happened next. That day, I decided to show up, not to her graduation, but in a way no one could stop. A way that would make her see me, even if she refused to speak to me. What I planned would risk the only fragile bridge left between us. But if I didn't try, that bridge would crumble into nothing. If you've ever been cut out of someone's life, you know the ache of watching from the sidelines. Stay with me, because what happened after she saw my gift, not a soul in that auditorium could have predicted. I was 52 years old when the message came, but the moment I read it, I felt smaller than I had in decades. My name is David, and for most of my adult life, I've been a railroad engineer, the kind of job that keeps you away from home more than it keeps you in it. When my daughter Anna was 7, her mother and I divorced. We told her it wouldn't change much, that I would still be there for every important moment. I meant it when I said it. But intentions are useless against time and distance. After the divorce, I took contracts that sent me across states, sometimes across oceans. It's just for a few years, I'd say, thinking of the bigger paychecks and the stability they would bring her. My father had always told me that providing was the truest form of love. So I missed birthdays, school plays, and even the day she learned to ride a bike without training wheels. I told myself she'd understand someday. That when she saw the roof over her head, the clothes on her back, the college fund I was building, she'd know I had been loving her in the only way I knew how. But a child doesn't measure love in dollars. They measure it in the number of times you're in the front row of the school auditorium, or sitting at the kitchen table when they come home from school. One of the clearest memories I have of her childhood is the day she played Claire de Lune at her first piano recital. I had promised to be there. I even bought her a new hair ribbon for the occasion. But a derailment on my route kept me in a tiny town hundreds of miles away. I called her that night, but she didn't want to talk. Her mother told me she'd cried herself to sleep. Over the years, I thought the gap between us was just life. She grew into a teenager, then a young woman, and I told myself the distance was natural, that kids that age often pulled away from their parents. I sent gifts for her birthdays, sometimes books I thought she'd like, sometimes jewelry, and I always included a handwritten card. Most of the time, I never heard back. Then came the email. It was a Tuesday, just past midnight, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The subject line was empty, but my eyes locked on the first line in the preview. Don't come to my graduation. I don't want to pretend. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. I opened it, hoping for a joke, some kind of misplaced sarcasm. But that was it. 2 sentences. No greeting, no sign-off. Just the blunt rejection of what I had assumed would be a chance to see her again, even from a distance. My chest felt tight, and not from age or fatigue. Shame has a way of weighing you down faster than any freight train I've ever driven. I sat in the dark, the glow of the phone screen fading to black, and stared at the ceiling. Images of her as a little girl flashed in my mind, holding my hand at the zoo, eating ice cream on a summer night, waving goodbye from the porch when I left for work. I had always believed there would be a next time. Now, it felt like I'd run out of them. I told myself it was just about the past, the missed moments, the years of absence. That was the cost I had to pay. I didn't know then that there was more to her decision, a reason that would twist the knife deeper when I found out. I thought about replying, about telling her I'd respect her wishes, but that I'd be there if she changed her mind. I wrote and erased the same sentence a dozen times. In the end, I didn't send anything. I didn't want to push her further away. But something shifted in me that night. It wasn't just the pain of being left out. It was the realization that this was my final chance to show her who I really was. Not the absent figure from her memories, but the man who had been quietly trying and failing to make amends. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to disappear from her life completely, not without one last attempt to reach her heart. In the weeks after her email, I tried to ignore the instinct to retreat. It would have been easier to do nothing, to accept the wall she had built and let it stand. But every time I imagined her walking across that stage without even knowing I was proud of her, my chest ached in a way that made sleep impossible. So I began with what I thought were small gestures, things that might slip past her defenses. I wrote her a letter in my own shaky handwriting, the kind I knew she could recognize from the notes I used to leave in her lunchbox. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I simply told her how much I admired her, how I had followed her progress from a distance, how I wanted her to know I was here if she ever needed me. I slipped the letter into a pale blue envelope and mailed it to her apartment. It came back unopened a week later. I tried again, sending her a small silver locket with an old photo inside, the two of us on a carousel when she was 4. This time, there was no return envelope, just silence. By the 3rd attempt, I thought maybe I needed to think bigger, to show her I wasn't just tossing gifts over a wall. I made a donation to her university scholarship fund in her name, something I hoped would make her proud, even if she didn't want to speak to me. I got a polite thank you from the school, and a curt text from her a few days later. Please stop. That was the moment the hope I'd been nursing began to feel like it was rotting inside me. No matter what I did, it wasn't enough to bridge the gap. I'd look at my phone at night, scrolling through old photos, wondering if there was any point in trying again. I imagined her reading my messages and feeling nothing but irritation. The more I reached out, the more it seemed I was pushing her further away. I finally decided to take a different approach. If I couldn't get through to her directly, maybe I could understand what I'd done, or what she thought I'd done, to make her so unwilling to let me in. That's how I found myself standing outside a coffee shop on a windy Saturday morning, waiting for her closest friend, Mia. Mia had known Anna since they were 15. I'd met her a few times over the years, back when Anna still brought friends home. She arrived bundled in a scarf, eyes sharp but not unkind. We ordered coffee and sat at a small table in the corner. I'm not here to make things harder for her, I said. I just, I don't understand why she's so angry. I know I wasn't there enough, but this feels bigger than that. Mia hesitated, stirring her coffee until the foam disappeared. There are things you don't know, she said finally. Things she's believed for a long time. My stomach tightened. Like what? She leaned in, lowering her voice. She's told people you abandoned her and her mom, that you never helped, never sent money. She says her mom struggled to keep the lights on, and that you didn't care. The words hit me harder than I expected. That's not true, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I sent money every month. I covered her school tuition, her braces, even the down payment on that house they lived in for years. Mia nodded slowly, as if she'd suspected there was more to the story. If that's true, she doesn't know it. And if she doesn't know it, it's because someone didn't want her to. That's when the pieces started falling into place. Her mother and I hadn't spoken much after the divorce, except through lawyers or short calls about logistics. I'd always sent the checks directly to her, trusting that Anna's needs were being met. If her mother had decided to keep that from her, to tell her I'd given nothing, then every absence, every missed recital, would have looked like a deliberate abandonment. I sat back, my hands tightening around the coffee cup. The betrayal wasn't just that she believed I didn't care. It was that she'd been living her whole life under a lie I hadn't even known existed. Mia reached across the table. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I just think you need to know what you're up against. If you want her to hear you, you have to understand the story she's been told. The anger I felt toward her mother was hot, immediate, but underneath it was a sharper pain, the realization that I'd been fighting the wrong battle. I thought I was trying to close a gap created by years of distance. In reality, I was trying to reach someone who'd been taught to see me as the villain. I left the coffee shop with the wind colder against my face than when I'd gone in. For the first time in years, I wasn't just guilty. I was determined. If she was going to hate me, she was at least going to know the truth about why. For 2 days after my meeting with Mia, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Anna's face at 7 years old, waiting for me to show up at a school play I'd missed. Or at 10, hugging her mother while I loaded my bags into the car for another long trip. I thought I'd failed her because of my absence. Now I knew I'd been erased from her life on purpose. The anger sat in my chest like a furnace, burning hotter each hour. I'd been paying, providing, trying, while she'd been told a story in which I was nothing but a coward who'd walked away. Every unopened letter, every gift returned. It all made sense now. She didn't see me as a father making amends. She saw me as a man trying to buy forgiveness for crimes I never committed. I wanted to confront her mother, to demand an explanation, but I knew it would only make things worse. Anna would see it as proof that I was the problem. If I wanted to change the narrative, I couldn't storm in swinging. I had to be precise. The decision came quietly, sometime between midnight and dawn on the 3rd day. I wasn't going to her graduation to sit in the crowd and clap. I was going to do something that would pierce the wall between us, and I would do it without humiliating her or making her feel cornered. She'd spent years believing I was the villain. If I showed up like one, she'd never see the truth. That's when the idea of a 2-part plan started to take shape. The first part was personal. I would find a way to reach her heart during the graduation ceremony without crossing her boundaries. something she couldn't ignore, but also couldn't label as an intrusion. The second part was about justice, gathering proof of everything I had done for her over the years. Not to shove in her face, but to keep ready for the moment she might be willing to listen. I went to my safe that night, a small steel box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were bank statements, copies of checks, letters from lawyers, and receipts for tuition payments, orthodontist bills, and the down payment on the house her mother had lived in until she remarried. I spread them out across my kitchen table, the paper smelling faintly of dust and old ink. This was my history, my evidence, the invisible thread I'd been holding on to while she thought I'd let go. I put the most significant documents in a neat folder, not as a weapon, but as a lifeline. Someday, when the time was right, I'd hand it to her, and she'd see the truth in black and white. But that was the long game. The short game was trickier. I needed a gesture that would bypass years of anger and confusion and land somewhere closer to her heart. I thought about the carousel photo in the locket I'd sent, how it had gone unopened. That hurt, but it told me something. She wasn't ready to face the memories head on. I needed to be subtle. I called Mia and asked her for a favor. "I know this is a lot to ask," I said, "but I need to get something into her hands on graduation day, not during the ceremony, before she walks out there." "What is it?" she asked. "A letter, and a photo, and maybe something else." There was a pause. "If it's not going to embarrass her, I'll help," she said. "But if she feels ambushed," "She won't," I promised. "It's not about proving a point in front of everyone. It's about letting her know I'm proud of her, even if I can't sit in the audience." I spent the next few days crafting the letter. I wrote about the first time I held her, how tiny her hand was in mine. I told her how I'd followed her achievements from a distance, the scholarships, the dean's list, the charity work she'd done. I told her I was sorry for the times I wasn't there, and that I understood if she couldn't forgive me yet. But I also told her that no matter what, I would always be in her corner. At the end of the letter, I included a single folded sheet, a list of dates and amounts I'd contributed over the years, not to boast, but so she would know the truth was there, waiting for her if she wanted it. And I ended with the words, "If I've done wrong, let me spend the rest of my life making it right." The photo I chose was from that piano recital I'd missed. Her mother had sent it to me years ago. Anna in a pale blue dress, smiling beside the piano, a ribbon in her hair. I had the image printed and framed in a simple wooden border. When I sealed the envelope, my hands were steady for the first time in days. The plan was in motion. I didn't know if it would change anything, but it was better than standing still, drowning in the version of me she'd been told about. The week before graduation, my small apartment became a staging ground. Every surface was covered. The kitchen counter stacked with envelopes, my desk buried under photo prints, my couch draped with tissue paper for wrapping. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and fresh-cut flowers from the bouquet I'd already ordered. White lilies and roses, her mother's favorite combination when Anna was little. I booked a professional photographer I'd worked with once on a charity project. "I don't want posed shots," I told him. "I just want to be somewhere in the background, far enough away that she doesn't feel I'm intruding, but close enough to be part of the day in some quiet way." He understood immediately, suggesting we meet at the campus hours before the ceremony so he could capture candid moments from a distance. The centerpiece of it all was the letter. I rewrote it 3 times before I felt it said exactly what I needed. It wasn't about proving her wrong. It wasn't about listing facts like ammunition. It was about telling her the truth in a way she could hold without it cutting her hands. I laid it out in 3 parts. Memories of her childhood, acknowledgement of my failures, and a simple statement of fact. Every payment I'd sent over 15 years, documented and dated. At the bottom, I wrote, "If I've done wrong, let me spend the rest of my life making it right." It was the most honest sentence I'd put on paper in years. I slipped the letter into a cream-colored envelope along with a single photo. Anna at her piano recital, smiling in that pale blue dress. Beneath it, I placed copies of receipts and bank records, not to overwhelm her, but to let her know the proof existed if she wanted to see more. The bouquet was the final touch. I had the florist wrap it in plain paper. No bright ribbons, no fanfare, just flowers. A quiet symbol of love, unadorned by anything that could feel like a show. Still, I knew gestures could be misinterpreted, so I took another step. I scanned every piece of evidence and sent it to my lawyer, an old friend from my railroad days. "Hold on to this," I told him over the phone. "If anything ever comes up that affects my name or my record, I want you to have it ready." "You expecting trouble?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I've been blindsided before. I'm not letting that happen again." 3 days before the ceremony, I called Mia. "I need your help one more time," I said. "I figured you'd call," she replied, almost smiling through the line. "I want her to have the letter and the flowers before she walks on stage, not after, not mailed, before. But it has to be discreet. I don't want her to feel trapped." There was a pause. "If I do this, I'm going to have to lie to her, just a little. Tell her it's something from the school or from a faculty member." "I hate asking you to lie," I said, "but if she knows it's from me before she opens it, she might never open it at all." Mia agreed, with one condition. "If she gets upset, you have to promise me you'll stay where you are. No sudden appearances." "Deal," I said. On the morning of the ceremony, I dressed in a dark suit that blended into the crowd. The photographer met me near the student center, his camera already slung over his shoulder. We walked the campus quietly, choosing a spot where I could see the entrance to the auditorium without being obvious. At 9:30 a.m., Mia arrived with the bouquet and the envelope tucked into her tote bag. She gave me a small nod before disappearing inside. I watched from a distance as graduates milled around in their caps and gowns, laughing and posing for photos. Then I saw her. Anna, taller than I remembered, her hair pinned back, her gown flowing in the breeze. My chest tightened. Mia approached her casually, said something that made her smile, then handed her the tote. Anna peeked inside, pulled out the bouquet first, then the envelope. Even from where I stood, I could see her expression change. Curiosity first, then something more complicated. She didn't open the letter right away. She tucked it under her arm, still holding the flowers. The photographer caught every frame, the moment she took the bag, the brief glance around as if sensing something, the way her fingers lingered on the edge of the envelope. I stayed exactly where I'd promised I would. My hands clasped behind my back, heart hammering. I didn't know if she would read the letter before walking on stage, or if she'd throw it away the moment she was alone. But I knew it was there, in her hands, and that was more than I'd had in years. The ceremony began, with the muffled hum of voices filling the auditorium. Rows of proud parents leaned forward in their seats, holding up phones, ready to capture their child's moment. I stood at the far end of the hall, close enough to see her, but far enough to be swallowed by the shadows. The photographer kept his distance, camera lens glinting faintly in the stage lights. On stage, the faculty filed in, taking their seats. Graduates lined up in the wings, their caps tilted, tassels swaying. My eyes scanned the crowd until I found her. Anna stood near the middle of the line, the bouquet resting against her gown. She was flipping through the program, distracted, until her fingers brushed against the envelope. I watched her pause, glance down, then slip a nail under the flap. She unfolded the letter slowly, like she was bracing herself for what might be inside. The lights from backstage cast a warm glow on her face as she began to read. From where I stood, I couldn't hear a word, but I saw her eyes move across the page, saw the moment her lips pressed together, the way her shoulders shifted ever so slightly. She read on, her gaze lingering longer on certain lines, until I saw the faint shimmer in her eyes. She lifted a hand quickly, as if to push a loose strand of hair away. But I knew it was to wipe the first tear before it fell. When she reached the end, she stayed still for a long moment, the paper trembling in her hands. Then, as if driven by instinct, she lifted her head and scanned the audience. Her gaze moved across the faces, row by row, searching. And then she found me. I felt it before I saw it, the way her eyes locked on mine. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The hall was filled with the murmur of names being called, but in that second, it was quiet between us. I didn't lift a hand to wave. I didn't mouth any words. I just stood there, letting her see me as I was, not defensive, not demanding, not asking for anything. I smiled, not the smile you give to smooth over tension, but the one that comes from seeing someone you've missed for too long. It was a smile I hoped would say everything I couldn't. I'm proud of you. I'm here. I always was. Her expression flickered. Confusion, recognition, something close to disbelief. And then the next name was called. She had to turn away, stepping forward in line. But I caught the tiniest motion. A breath she let out slowly, almost like relief. The rest of the ceremony played out like any other. Graduates crossed the stage, shook hands, posed for photos. When Anna's name was called, I clapped with everyone else, even though my hands ached from how tightly I'd been holding them together. She accepted her diploma, smiled for the official photo, then stepped back into the line to return to her seat. I stayed where I was until the end, watching the caps fly into the air in a burst of celebration. The graduates spilled into the lobby, their families swarming around them for hugs and pictures. I didn't move. This wasn't my moment to take. I had given her what I came to give. But sometimes, moments find you anyway. One of the faculty members, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a clipboard, had been standing near the side stage during the ceremony. She must have noticed the silent exchange between Anna and me, because as she passed by, she stopped to speak to the photographer. I saw them talking, gesturing toward me, then toward Anna. A few minutes later, she approached me herself. "You're her father, aren't you?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. "I saw her reading your letter, and I saw her looking for you." The woman smiled faintly. "That was Something special. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She glanced at the photographer again. Would you mind if we shared a photo? Just the one where you were standing at the back. There's something about it. It tells a story people should hear. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to embarrass Anna or turn this into some spectacle. But the faculty member assured me it wouldn't be sensationalized. Just a short note about a father who waited quietly all morning to see his daughter graduate. By the time I got home that evening, the post was already online. A simple photograph of me in the far corner of the auditorium, the bouquet, an empty seat beside me, with the caption, "He stood here for hours, not to interrupt her day, but just to be present." It didn't take long for people to start sharing it. The story spread faster than I expected. Friends, strangers, even a few old colleagues reached out. Some wrote messages about forgiveness, others about the importance of showing up, no matter how late. By midnight, the post had been shared thousands of times. My phone buzzed with notifications I didn't check. I was too busy staring at the last text I'd received that evening. It was from Anna. Just 4 words. "Can we talk soon?" I read it over and over, wondering if it was a doorway or just a window. Something small, maybe temporary, but still an opening where before there had been nothing. Somewhere out there, people were reading about the quiet father at the back of the hall. They didn't know the whole truth, not yet. But maybe Anna would. And maybe, for the first time in years, we could start from the same story. The morning after the ceremony, I was still half asleep when my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought it might have been a dream, that the text from Anna had only existed in the hazy hours before dawn. But there it was, clear as day. "If you're free, dinner tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing a reply. "I'll be there." No questions, no conditions, just agreement. The following evening, I drove to the small townhouse address she'd sent me. I arrived 10 minutes early, but sat in the car until exactly the time we'd agreed on. I didn't want to risk seeming overeager, though my hands were tight on the steering wheel the whole wait. She opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her hair loose. For the first time in years, her expression wasn't guarded, just cautious, like someone testing the temperature of the water before stepping in. "Come in," she said quietly. Inside, the table was already set for 2. A pot of pasta simmered on the stove, filling the air with the smell of garlic and basil. We sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I was bracing for questions, maybe accusations, but they didn't come. Instead, she asked, "How's work?" I almost laughed at the simplicity of it. We talked about my job, her plans after graduation, the trip she wanted to take with friends before starting her new position. There were no sharp turns into the past, no sudden confrontations. Just the present. 2 people sharing a meal, trying to remember how to talk to each other without the weight of everything that had come before. By the time we finished dessert, the atmosphere had shifted. The caution was still there, but so was something softer. We moved to the small balcony off her living room, the night air cool against our faces. "I read the whole letter," she said finally, her voice low but steady. I waited, not wanting to push her. "I saw the list, the dates, the amounts. I know you weren't lying." She took a slow breath. "I still have questions, and I want to hear Mom's side, but I can't pretend I don't know now." Her words settled between us like something fragile, a truth that couldn't be unspoken. I didn't rush to fill the silence. "I'm glad you read it," I said, "and I'm here for every question you have, whenever you're ready." She nodded, her eyes on the city lights beyond the balcony. "It doesn't change the fact that you missed a lot," she said, "but it changes why I thought you did." That was the moment I understood that forgiveness wasn't going to come in one sweeping gesture. It would be a slow walk, step by step, with room for both of us to trip and catch ourselves. I had spent years hoping for one big moment to fix everything. Now, I knew the real work would happen in the smaller moments. The dinners, the phone calls, the times I showed up without expectation. We stood there a while longer, not saying much. The quiet didn't feel empty this time. It felt like space. Space for something new to grow. Finally, she turned toward me. "I can't promise where we'll end up," she said, "but I'm willing to see." "That's all I could ever ask for," I replied. We stepped back inside, and as I left that night, she walked me to the door. On impulse, she hugged me. Brief, almost hesitant, but real. Driving home, I realized I didn't need to know the ending. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking backward or forward with dread. I was just grateful for the space we were standing in now. Somewhere between the hurt and the hope, we'd found a starting point.